I forwarded it to you. Her mic is on. Hello.
Hi, Bernard. Morning.
Hello, good morning, Bernard.
Okay. They've muted me. No worry. to EdTech Monday, and it's a special segment of the show where we discuss education and technology and all those beautiful things. But it's a platform created by the Mastercard Foundation, and this is in partnership with Meltwater, or MEST for short. So the Mastercard Foundation has many things it does. They have a regional center for innovative training and learning in ICT. And as part of their strategy to find solutions to Africa's problems, particularly youth unemployment, and create or close the gap in access to quality education, they've created this EdTech Monday platform, which builds on the work of the Young Africa Work Strategy, which wants to create meaningful jobs by the year 2030 for Africans. And so every last Monday of the month, we bring you EdTech Monday. And today's edition is streaming live on CTFM and also on the MEST Africa page. And what are we talking about today? We'll be discussing how early should we expect learners to embrace technology, right? We're talking about introducing technology to young students. That's our topic for the day. And I have a very important panel of people who are very instrumental in education. They will share their thoughts and experiences on how early childhood educators are embracing and can embrace technology in advanced learning or to advanced learning in and outside the classroom. They will also tackle how technology can help inculcate literacy and numeracy skills and lay a strong foundation for learning. And also, what's the best way to use technology in a typical Ghanaian classroom with all our challenges with internet and all of those things? And how can EdTech ecosystem be harnessed to support all of this? What's the best time to introduce technology to your children in a learning space? Those are some of the topics. Send us your comments on the stream. If you're watching on Facebook, if you're listening on air, send us a WhatsApp message or question 054-998-6996. My guest, Dr. Naomi Ejepong, is the Director of Operations at Alpha Beta Education Center. And with the support of a dedicated team, Naomi has designed and implemented a full-time leadership track called the Idinkrahini Leadership Program. It's a program for young people, runs parallel to the Cambridge International Education Curriculum, which provides an enriched educational experience, ensuring that students Commission for UNESCO in her role as head of the Secretariat. She's the coordinator of Ghana's presence and contributions to dialogue and action at UNESCO. As a member state, she also advises the government of Ghana on UNESCO matters. She's an experienced teacher, policymaker, education manager, and communications professional. Mrs. Nekwita, if you can hear me, good morning.
Good morning, Bernard, and good morning to your listeners.
Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you. Also on the panel is Raphael Winyamibie. He is the founder and CEO of Wired Tutor, an EdTech company that gives parents and students the chance to book teachers online through the Wired Tutor platform for tutoring services. Raphael is also the founder of Dream High Foundation, a non-profit organization focused on working on 3 sustainable development goals: no poverty, zero hunger, and quality education. He believes in educating young people through the use of technology, and that's the panacea, in his view, to modern society's problems. Raphael, thanks for joining us on EdTech Monday. Good morning. Raphael, can you hear me? All right, I'm sure Raphael will hear me at some point. I had Naomi Ejepong on the line as well. I introduced her earlier, but I don't think she heard me. Dr. Ejepong, if you can hear me, good morning again.
Hi, good morning. I think you froze at the time that you were doing the introduction, so sorry if I didn't respond.
Oh, okay. I've been unfrozen now. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So maybe I'll start with you, Naomi. A brief introduction of who you are and what you do, and how this topic of EdTech with young children applies to your field of work?
Sure. So I think you read in my bio, I'm the Director of Operations at Alpha Beta School in Dansoman. We've been running for almost 35 years. So this conversation is very dear to our hearts because our school started off as a Montessori preschool all the way back in 1989. So we have quite a bit of experience with this. We use the Montessori method, which typically focuses on self-directed activity, hands-on learning, and a lot of collaborative play, which obviously go a long way to laying foundations of lifelong learning. There's a lot of focus on experiential learning and a child's natural curiosity. So it's interesting that we're having a conversation today about how technology can enhance that. Technology can play a key role in enhancing the teaching and learning experience even for young children. However, I will say that they have to be used very responsibly and very well supervised. And they must be used in a way that engages the children so that they can get the maximum benefit from it. I will state at this point that the fundamental purpose for early childhood development is to make sure that children develop socially, physically, morally. So, there's a lot of fundamental things we're teaching about their behavior, about courtesy, respect, tolerating each other. And in as much as technology can enhance their learning experience, that has to be balanced up against, the fundamental things that we want to teach them. Because if we don't balance, their ability to manage technology with all the other social skills they're supposed to be learning, we could end up with very tech-savvy children, but they may be very antisocial and screen addicted. So I think that, the starting point for this conversation for us should be that, what is the fundamental purpose of early childhood development and how can technology enhance that?
Fair enough. And I'm sure we'll develop that as the program continues. Let me come to Mrs. Amasewa Nekwe-Tete. So tell us more about what you do and how this topic relates to your line of work.
Thank you, Bernard. Ghana Commission for UNESCO, as you read, is the agency responsible for Ghana's relations with UNESCO. And education is a great part of UNESCO's work. A recent important document that has come out of UNESCO is the Futures of Education document. Early childhood is also an important part. Usually when you talk about education, you segment it, early childhood, you talk about primary, secondary, and then higher education. Allow me to start with a little quote from the Futures of Education document. It says the environmental and climate change challenges now facing the planet have important ramifications for early childhood education. And while individual child-centered pedagogies can predominate in many settings, these approaches need revision to reflect that, like all human beings, children are part of a more than human world. And then this is what I want to start my discussion based on, that we understand that technology has come to meet us. To start with, technology is not a new thing. It is when you use new objects to help your world. But we can no longer ignore the fact that there is more to our lives than the human beings in it. It means that we must begin to look at how to use early childhood education, not just to develop the child's relationships with other human beings and with their environment, small environment, but also in the digital sphere. And I suspect it is conversations around this and what the government of Ghana is doing in this light that got MEST to ask me to join this panel. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic. And I will explore that in addition to issues of basic literacy and numeracy later. But let me come to Dr. Japong again. You are an educator. Your school is over 30 years old. What are some of the examples of technology tools used, particularly in early childhood development? And how do these tools provide a rich learning environment for today's young learner? Naomi, please check your mic.
Sorry. So as parents or even as educators, there are thousands and thousands of things online which, offer opportunities for children to engage. But, one of the key things I would say with all of these things, whether they're videos on YouTube, whether they are apps, whether they are other online tools, supervision, is absolutely key. For every digital experience, an educator needs to think about what a child is going to gain out of it. So for example, a teacher may choose to go on YouTube and look for online videos to reinforce a concept. So if you're teaching children about volcanoes, or you're teaching children about planets, or you're teaching children about continents, you might find videos that better explain it than just, explaining on the board. Sometimes you might look for songs that will help the children to be able to remember the planets or the continents. So those are very useful, but again, it's, how the teacher uses them. Like I mentioned before, the tools should be there to enhance the child's experience. So, a teacher needs to think around, okay, this is just a part of the lesson. So how am I going to use this to, to engage the children and start a conversation with them? So there are online videos, there are online apps, which are also good for reinforcing, children practicing their numbers, their letters, or even basic literacy and numeracy skills, colors, shapes, and a lot of things for problem solving and critical thinking, which can be used for even by children at a very young age. So there will be apps like Khan Academy or Leapfrog Academy, which provide interactive games or activities that help children to learn and master concepts. Some of the good thing about some of these apps is that they also help you to track your child's progress. I'm sure we can talk about that a bit later. Now, there are other things, like at our school, we offer the Pearson edXL curriculum, which is a British curriculum, and they provide an online system called Active Learn, which for us has provided very useful content. So you'll get things like interactive books that the children can use, so they can be answering quizzes whilst they're reading the book, and the children love them. It's allowed some of the very young children to read, some are even reading hundreds of books because they're so engaging for them. There's also content on there that can be used on smart boards or projected, so either videos or pictures that just make learning more engaging and more fun than what we were used to when we were in school, which maybe just chalk and board, and that was about it. So in terms of content, now there's a lot of content, but depending on what you're teaching, the teacher really has to plan in advance and decide. Of course, some of them are more classroom friendly than others, so things that you can project for everybody to use. Obviously, depending on how advanced the school is, they may allow children to bring in tablets and gadgets, etc. But to a large extent, whatever is being done, whether you're allowing children to use a gadget in class or whether you're projecting, there has to be a clear objective for each and every digital experience that a child is exposed to.
Let's stay with that, Naomi. I wanted to find out about the age at which young children can be introduced to technology, because we are told that it's important to help develop basic literacy and numeracy. But I know a lot of parents are very concerned as to which age they want to even start getting their young ones to interact with technology at all. What are your thoughts on this in terms of using it to encourage them to read and write? Is there a standard date, age, or any thresholds, or how does Alpha Beta deal with it? So at what stage do you introduce technology in the classroom for your students?
Okay, so I think it depends on what you're talking about. I mean, technology can be different things. So it can be projecting something, it can be showing something on a laptop. It doesn't necessarily, I don't know whether you're referring to use of technology as when should you give your child a phone or a tablet? Is that what you're referring to, or any type of
it's two parts. So in the classroom setting, obviously, do you start from when they are at creche? And what about the home setting? Is there a recommended time before you can give them, say, a tablet? So those are two strands of the same question.
Sure. So typically under 2 years old, there isn't really, it is not recommended for under 2s. So let's say above 2. So if you're working above 2, I mean, we have had a lot of experience, especially during the pandemic, where children couldn't attend school. So there's a lot of innovation around that. With regards to things like video calling, we realized that it was better for older children than the younger children. For younger children, especially, children who don't have a long attention span, after a few minutes, they're just like, a bit confused, and they can't really be able to listen to what somebody in the screen is saying. But what we did find useful was actually sending videos home. So we would record videos with teachers teaching or showing how an activity is done for the children to do at home. And that was very useful. In terms of now that we're back in physical school, teachers will use a lot of digital content, so pictures, videos, to be able to enhance the children's learning experience. So depending on what they're teaching them, they may use them to give them videos for songs, for even for physical activity where the children are copying, whatever is being done. So there's that aspect. When you talk about the parent's point of view, one of the most important things is that a parent has to separate what is education and what's entertainment, because that's a key thing. A lot of the time we find our young children wanting to take our phones and our tablets. Supervision is key. So you need to decide at that point, am I giving my child a phone to, do an app that's teaching them their game, their numbers, their colors, their shapes? Am I giving it to them to look at a YouTube video? And if so, what is the content of that YouTube video? And it's very important as a parent that you strictly supervise. I know sometimes it's easy for us, especially when the children, are giving us a little bit of pressure and we have something to do. It's easy to just give them a phone or a tablet, but it's very, very important that, one, we control the amount of time that they spend on a screen, but also more importantly, that we are sure of what they're consuming. Because I find with my children, they go on YouTube, where they start and where they end is two different things. And, if you're not careful and you don't monitor them carefully, they end up watching things that, perhaps are not in their interest to watch. So I don't know, Bernard, if I've adequately answered your question in terms of age.
That addresses it. I wanted us to take a short video before we continue the conversation. And this video essentially is a recording with a health expert on the topic, Dr. Abishai and Lima. She's a clinical psychologist. I don't know if that's a man or a woman, Abishai, I'm not sure, at the Brain and Mind Center. And this video is really on the impact of tech on young learners, especially when it comes to their socio-emotional, cognitive, and physical needs. So this will provide a bit more context as we continue the questioning. So we're ready for the video.
There has been a series of research, and I'm going to make particular emphasis to the research done by the American Academy of Pediatrics. They've come to realize that there is an age-appropriate limit to which we can be able to use tech devices. For example, from birth to the child is 18 months, which is about 1.5 years. They recommend strongly that parents should never hand screens or tablets to their children. They shouldn't even let them have any relationship to do with this TV and the others. Then when a child gets to 18 months to about 24 months,
a clinical psychologist who is with the Brain and Mind Center on the impact of tech on young learners, but the video is airing, but I think it's muted, so we are not getting the sound. In the meantime, my guests are Dr. Naomi Ejepong, Director of Operations, Alpha Beta Education Center, one of our leading private institutions in the country. She herself does a leadership development program for the kids. Mrs. Ama Nekwe Tete is the Secretary General of Ghana Commission for UNESCO. I have some UNESCO specific questions coming up shortly. What's the best standard for some of the things we're discussing? We're also hoping to have Raphael, but I don't know if we have him on the line. Raphael Winyamimbie, who's the CEO and founder of Wired Tutors, another company which provides parents and teachers and students the opportunity to book online through the Wired Tutor platform. We've been trying to make contact with him, and we're having some challenges there. Send your questions to us on 0549986996. And we've already received some interesting questions. I will read some as questions. I will read some questions. I will read some health expert, Dr. Abishai and Lima, on the impact of tech on young learners. I believe we have it now.
Piece of research, and I'm going to make particular emphasis to the research done by the American Academy of Pediatrics. They've come to realize that there is an age-appropriate limit to which we can be able to use tech devices. For example, from birth to the child is 18 months, which is about 1.5 years. They recommend strongly that parents should never hand screens or tablets to their children. They shouldn't even let them have any relationship to do with this TV and the others. Then when a child gets to 18 months to about 24 months, which is about roughly between 1.5 years to 2 years, they recommend that we can introduce these tech devices to the child, but the child doesn't have to spend more than 30 minutes a day on these tech devices, TV screens and the others. Then from the age of 2 years to 5 years, they recommend strongly that the child doesn't have to spend more than 1 hour on these tech devices. Because parents are supposed to put sort of barriers or limitations to how they use it. Then when the child is from 6 years till about 12, they recommend that you can be able to extend the time from about 1 to about 2 hours per day. But you should train the child to be able to use it in moderation, and the parent should always be around to observe what the child is actually watching. You select the media. There are some tablets that come with controls, parental controls, where you can set some age-appropriate limits. But let's be very mindful that the people who bring programs and say, oh, this is for children under 6 and the others, they could still bring some things that may not still be good for your child. That's why we recommend that even from 6 to 12 years, you still spend time with the child as much as possible when they are using these tech devices. Then from 12 to 18 years, you also let them know some limitations they can be able to have. They can freely use it as much as the parent will be able to give them time. But they also still recommend it shouldn't be more than 2 hours a day. And it should be something instructive. It should be something for educational purposes, something to motivate a child. And still the parent must be very much careful about what a child is actually watching and the social media handles they are going to be on, if you actually permit them to be, and you put in some sort of monitoring devices. Aside this, when a child is able to reach 18 and above, you are free to allow him or her use it as much as possible. But everything that we are handed over comes with responsibility. Neurosurgeons and scientists have come to realize that the brain doesn't fully get developed until a person is about 18 years or 24 years. That's the reason why we are very careful about certain things that could really affect the brain as it is developing. So some general rules: parents must always make time to be with their children when they are using these devices. So we've come to realize that technology and electronic devices can be seen as a double-edged sword. They could be used positively or negatively. They could have good effects or bad effects. So parents must be the sort of parents they want their children to be in the future. This means that parents must lead by example. If you spend so much time on these devices as a parent, your children will learn from you, because children are very quick at what you call social learning or vicarious learning. That is, learning by observing what adults are doing, better than instructional learning. Let's realize that whom we are today as people, as individuals, is as a result of the thoughts and decisions we made some time ago in our past. So the decisions and thoughts we are making today, or allowing to control us, would affect our future. Finally, let's come to realize that good family relationships, physical family relationships, and social connectedness always promotes good mental health.
All right. So that was our health expert, Dr. Abishai Anim Lima. I'm sure we all agree with what he said. Let's come back to the conversation, building on from there. So I'm coming to you, Mrs. Nekwe Tete. So what are generally some of the gaps and opportunities in the early childhood education sector in Ghana in general?
Thank you, Bernard. I think it's important that we reiterate that we are talking about early childhood. And in Ghana, we peg that from 4 years all the way up to 7 or maybe 8. This is pre-primary education. When you're talking about educational technologies for this age group, you necessarily must look at using the technologies with them, the use of the technologies by them, and then the use of the technologies for them. And depending on which one you're talking about, the conversation goes in a particular way. A lot of these young people are not able to use these technologies by themselves, at least not initially. It is clear to us that technology is important, and it is also clear, like Dr. Japon mentioned and Dr. Abishai mentioned, that we must expose children to technology early, from 2 years, from 3 years. It's going to be a part of the world that they have been born into. But how do we do it? How do we do it with them? How do we make sure they do it? And then how do we do it for them should be the main things that we're looking at. It is also clear that we are looking at an age group that have the parents' interests at a really high rate. You also need the parents on board. A lot of the education that a child gets at this point is not only in the kindergarten they attend, but also at home. We've spoken about the use of apps, etc. So parents need to be on board as much as educationists are. Otherwise, whatever is done in school is going to be undone by the parents. And already some good advice has gone in. But to your question, what can we do or what are we doing in Ghana? Again, let me refer to two documents that we have in this country. The first is the Early Childhood Education Policy Framework 2021. It's a fairly new document. If you allow me, I'll read a paragraph. So it says the early years of life are critical for every child. The fundamental organization and functional capabilities of the brain are established during this phase as young children interact with and make sense of their world. So early childhood education at kindergarten offers children a lead in their primary schooling and positively influences later performance in life. It goes on to talk about what UNESCO says about children aged 4 to 5 who experience school readiness through a quality early childhood education. Early childhood education is one way of providing opportunities for children from less privileged backgrounds by helping them to eliminate the inequalities in educational opportunities that are inherent in the different geographical contexts of Ghana. And therefore, it's important to have a national policy, and this is what I wanted to dwell on, to ensure that every 4 to 5-year-old benefits from quality early childhood education. And this is the document that we are speaking about. Now, whilst that document acknowledges that it is important for us to have every child, irrespective of their background, to have digital education from the onset. It's a framework, so it stops short of telling us how it is to be done. We do know that many players in the private education sphere work in the early childhood space. So a child's experience of digital education may vary depending on where they go to school. So I suppose the next question becomes, how does the public school child experience digital technology? And there I go to the curriculum for preschools, the 2019 document. And one of the pillars is creativity and innovation. And it says this competence will help learners develop an entrepreneurial skill that requires imagination, ingenuity of ideas, art, technology, and creativity. Learners will be able to think independently and create solutions to their problems. So it is clear from this 2019 document that even at that age, we need it. They carry on, I'll finish in a bit. They carry on to say digital literacy, developing learners to discover, acquire, and communicate through ICT to support their learning and make use of digital media responsibly is important. And so Ghana's learners must be taught to appreciate the opportunities provided through the curriculum and strive to their best in the fields of ICT as a pedagogical tool. I could go on, but this is the point that I want to make. Both documents accept that we need to start our young people on digital education. They are good start documents, but they stop short of telling us exactly what we're going to do in our schools to let that happen. As a country, we are aware of our limitations. It may not be feasible to hand every child a device. But if you recall, I said earlier on, we are looking at the use of educational technologies with, by, and for the children. So perhaps one of the easiest means is to start looking at for the children, the use of educational technologies by the teachers, by the instructors, in their research, looking for videos that can be shown to these young people, songs to teach them, to help them with their pedagogical growth. And so as a country, that is the discussion we need to have. Our experts have clearly said that we do need our young people to start learning, and we also need digital tools to help them. Exactly how are we going to go about it? is the question, Bernard.
Thank you. That was quite comprehensive. We appreciate it. We will get the documents you made reference to. Hopefully it will feed into further programming. But let me come to Dr. Ejepong. Any other thoughts on gaps and opportunities? Because you also, as a private education institution, you get to see a part of the challenge that policymakers may not be able to see. So in implementing education, particularly at the early childhood education stage, have you noticed any other gaps and opportunities that you want to comment on at this point, Dr. Ejepong?
I mean, I think that, the previous speaker did touch on us having to innovate. Obviously, in the part of the world that we're in, especially given that a large majority of Ghanaian children are in the public sector, we will need to innovate and try and figure out how we can provide digital skills for the mass of children. And like she said, even if we can get out to the teachers and, so that the teachers can have access to devices and have access to the internet so that they can introduce things to the children which they would not otherwise have had. If things like projectors or bigger TV screens could be made available, that's at least a stopgap measure. For us to be able to reach children who may not have a device in their homes. So I think, again, a lot of it is around how we innovate and how we scale. I think that whatever solutions we come up with have to be scalable for them to make a huge impact.
Thank you. Mrs. Nekwitete, you nicely categorized technology use by early childhood or generally into three: with them, by them, and for them. And I thought that was a very neat categorization. My question for you is, does this change as the kids go, as they grow? So would you say, for example, that at early childhood, it's with them, and then as they grow, it becomes for them or whatever? Is there I wanted to just add a bit of meat to that, because I never thought about it that way, that yes, technology in education for early learners, but yet we must distinguish between using it with them, they using it by themselves, and then we procuring it for them. If you can elaborate a bit on that.
Thank you, Bernard. It's important to say that these distinctions are not my creation. You find them in a lot of research on early childhood education. To your first question, I do not think it changes much. So long as education involves some kind of instruction, it's important to look at technology in these three ways. Obviously, there is a lot more scaffolding at the early childhood stage. It's important, a good Australian document, statement on the use of digital technologies that I came across, breaks it down to helping young people use digital technologies to forge relationships with each other, with their peers, with their teachers, helping them use it mindful of their well-being and their health. And Dr. Abishai made mention of it. We talk about posture, young people not knowing when to stop. Dr. Ejepong spoke about how many, I think it was Dr. Abishai as well, how long should you just leave it to the child and just go away because they are being troublesome? Will you put it on and just leave? Are you very sure you know the content? But also citizenship. The digital world is a whole new world, and you need to be able to interact in it well. If the child is not aware of what they can and cannot do, should they put the camera on? Should they start just recording things because someone has asked them for it? And then arguably most importantly in the educational sphere, using it as a pedagogical tool. Play is an important part of early childhood. It's recognized as a way to help children learn. So how do you infuse and inculcate educational tools into play? What should the pedagogy be? Obviously, we are speaking about difficulties in getting resources in a country like Ghana. How can we leverage technology so that rather than going out there and getting textbooks, you can get this information from the internet, videos for free, you can show them what it is that you want to do. And so these are the thoughts that should go in. It may be helpful as a country to have a policy of some sort on how we intend to do this very clearly, just for digital technologies in education. Bernard.
Their learning and development, and that they have the tools necessary to compete in the global market. I'm asking this from the context of the big divide we see between private and public. We do know that during the COVID crisis, a lot of the public schools didn't know what to do. Generally speaking, parents within that sphere are less well off financially. Class sizes are larger, so managing students will be more difficult. But we know that in the modern world, students have to be equipped with all the tools necessary. So in answering the question, you can also kids and what we can learn. Dr. Japon, that's a big question for you.
Hi, Bernard. I'd love to answer your question, but I didn't hear half of it, so you froze again in the middle.
No, so there are two things. I was asking you to comment generally about how we support young learners in their development using technology, and also asking you to comment on what the public sector institutions can learn from the private sector like yours, because as you rightly said, during the COVID period, a lot of the private sector schools found innovative ways of keeping the classes going on. So that was my question.
All right. So I think one of the things, which has been mentioned already is that, the internet provides a wealth of information. So let's not assume that if a child doesn't have a device in front of them, it doesn't, it means that they can't pick up some of these skills. Even if we look at the subject of STEM, in early childhood, there are so many other things that can be done to instill a learning of STEM in young children. So something as basic as play can still get them to have an interest in science. If they're playing in water, they're looking at sinking or floating, or even a child who is in a rural area, right? When they look at a natural science class and they go out and they explore, the different types of soil, the different types of rocks, the different types of leaves, all of those things are scientific. Building. If they build something with sticks or build something with blocks. But obviously, when it comes to technology, if a teacher has access to a device, it makes a huge difference, because it makes a difference in what they know and what they are able to teach a child. So I think that from a public sector point of view, we need to look at accessibility, especially when it comes to the internet. And providing a way for teachers to access it, because beyond us being able to provide devices for every child, which is not that straightforward, we can look at, okay, can we have one lab in each community? Because a child doesn't necessarily need to be, obviously, for privileged children, they might have access to a device on a regular basis, but for a child who even has access once a week, it makes a huge difference. And there are actually some organizations that are doing things like that. So I recently spoke to one organization who are looking at low-cost private schools, and then what they're doing is they're providing these sort of labs for them where they give them phone devices, and so the children go in there and they're able to. There's actually an app that they've generated, so they put them in these low-cost schools, and the children have access. They sanitize their hands, and they go and they just play with the devices. So these are some of the things that we can look at, which are just a bit of a stopgap, instead of us thinking that, okay, for us to spread technology or digital experience, we have to provide, a device for everybody. I don't know if that answers your question, Bernard.
No, that is fantastic. Before I come to Mrs. Nekwichet, let's take another insert. This time from parents. We asked them to talk about generally the issue of young people and technology and how they apply it in their various contexts. Here are some views that they shared.
Well, for me, I would choose age 2+ for a child to have access to internet and technology devices. Yes, I do encourage my children to make use of laptops and technology devices. Reason is this is the going trend and you cannot separate your child from the going trends. Now the schools and everywhere are using technology devices, therefore they have to know their environments, get used to them, and also tag along. So yes, I would encourage that because it's the going trend and you can't separate that. For that, there are many fears, and the concern is that it is already an overexposure. You do not have control of what the child can do, even if you devise other ways of monitoring. It's not absolute that you can control what your child has access to. So these are my concerns.
I believe the ideal age to expose my child to technology or technological devices would be 5+. And I think at that age, the child would have developed enough environmental kind of recognition and skill to be exposed to the internet. My reason for encouraging or allowing my child to use the internet or technological device for learning is it's an escape for me as a parent, because I'm able to do other things and keep him engaged whilst he's learning on the internet or learning from a technological device. And I also think that the internet affords him a vast scope of learnings, except that it needs to be contained or done under a controlled environment. Yeah, controlled content, if I should say. First of all, my concern is exposing my child to unwanted or unsuitable content for kids. So my greatest fear is not having enough control of the content he is watching. And I also have another fear of my child being addicted to technology and not exposing himself to real life experiences around him and being addicted to technology itself. So that's my greatest fear and concern.
All right. So those were a couple of parents sharing their views. Let me come to Mrs. Nekwetete as we rewind down. What general advice would you give to parents and educators when considering an appropriate technology experience for early learners?
Thank you, Bernard. General advice. If you allow me to pick on the last parent, I think it's not too early for us to start thinking about content as well. If we are to use digital technologies in any meaningful way, we must begin to create our own content. Otherwise, we end up giving our children a different culture, only to complain later on. And so if this is to be part of our curriculum, then we must make sure that our songs, our stories, etc., can be found online, that the examples that are given online look like us. And so this is to put it out there for app developers, etc. It's not too early to start thinking about that. A general advice, it's a double-edged sword, technology, we've always said that. But rather than say because it has problems, you will not use it, let us begin to look at the advantages. And as parents, it has been said many times during this program, don't give it to your child as a way to quieten them. Make sure it's purposeful. You know exactly what you have set for them to watch. You know that it's age appropriate. And also importantly, that it is helping what they are already learning in school. And you can do this by checking what the curriculum is. Are they doing additions? What can I set them at home to help my child understand additions better? Rather than just putting them on YouTube, especially the kind of YouTube that just goes on to the next program after one ends up. So let us be aware of it. Also, there are some free apps and some paid apps that tell you exactly what your child is doing on the tablet or system. It may be a good idea to put some of these up. I use Google Link so that if the child starts to download something or is looking at something that they shouldn't look at, the system will not allow them. We need to help at early childhood. We need to help parents, schools, make sure that our children are not left behind. If you find yourself in a school that is doing very well, all the best. But if it's not, you need to supplement at home for the moment. Whilst as a country, we look at how to collectively design our digital space to make sure our children are not left behind, that we fully embrace the future of education. Thank you, Bernard.
Thank you, Dr. Japong. Any advice for parents and educators when considering an appropriate technology experience for early learners? Please check if your mic is on. We can't hear you.
Sorry, my apologies. So I was saying that there has to be clear objectives for each digital experience. And you know, if you're using it for entertainment, then you need to be clear about that and how much time. I think as the doctor mentioned, for young children, you know, it's advised that we don't leave them on they don't have screen time actually for more than an hour in a day, which you know, is something that parents need to be conscious about. If you're using digital experiences in the classroom, they should be complemented by discussions where possible. So if you're showing children a video, it should be used as a stimulus for a conversation around whatever subject is. Close supervision, extremely important. I think that has been mentioned quite a few times. You can't use the gadgets as a babysitter, and you have to be so careful now, especially with, like she mentioned, sometimes the YouTuber keeps moving onto another video, and there is a lot of content out there. Not all of it is great, so you need to be very, very careful where that is. You need to scrutinize materials well before you give them to your children. There can be surprises in the content. Now there are all sorts of values and all sorts of things being taught to children through cartoons. So you have to be extremely careful about the kind of content that you allow your children to consume. But there are also a lot of helpful apps, like I mentioned some before, you know, Khan Academy, Leapfrog, you know, things that are actually more academic-based content that are presented in a fun and interactive way. And they also help you to track your child's progress and allow your child to master certain skills. The last thing I'll mention as well, when it comes to appropriate technology experience, parents should consider, you know, other things like after-school programs in coding and robotics. You know, from about the age of 5, you know, children can start to embrace some of these things. And who knows, you know, your child might be the next sort of person to create you know, a big selling app. So it's something that it's coding now is actually a key skill. A lot of people shy away from it. But coding and robotics, if you want to get your children involved in things, are definitely, I would advise that parents consider them.
Let me read a few comments as we wrap up. This one says, this is from Nana Amoa. Though I no longer have children below 3, I'm wondering how parents can engage their children. For instance, in church, how would you keep your child quiet if you want to focus? By virtue of the fact that I am a digital migrant and they are digital natives, I would suppose that it would be best to teach them to discipline themselves, not to be slaves to tech devices. Okay. I find that education and constant reminders along with modeling myself works. Also, family standards should be made clear to all family members. Another one, good morning team. Can we get this clinical psychologist video to teach our children as a young parent with my first child? Thank you. You don't add your name to the message. Another one, Bernard, I'll be glad if you could share this part of the show at another time. I mean, the part about how much time kids should spend on screen. So a lot of people are interested in that. There's another interesting one here. Bernard, an old boy of a certain public school from his own resources has equipped 10 classrooms with e-learning systems with some aid from his mates, an investment of about $100,000. Can you believe the teachers are sabotaging the operation of these classrooms? I think they want the money. They don't want to give up their intellectual property for free. Can you imagine this? Well, those are some comments that have come in. I'll just take closing reactions or closing comments from Dr. Ejapong and Mrs. Nekwe Tete on EdTech Monday. So Dr. Ejapong, what are your closing thoughts for our viewers and listeners today?
Okay, so I think it's been a great discussion, a lot of food for thought. One of the things that I would say, you know, is the take home is that technology is good. It's not a bad thing. You know, it's something that has come to stay. It's something that has come to improve our lives. We just need to be intentional about the way and manner in which we expose our children to it. and make sure that it's enhancing their teaching and learning experience, whether at school or at home, rather than taking away from it. I think that would be my take.
Thank you. Mrs. Amasewa Nekwitete, your closing thoughts.
Thank you. Wanted to say that the Ghana Education Service has science resource centers in all the regions, and they teach coding and robotics. You may want to send your children there if you live in one of the regional capitals. It is important, these are my final and my closing thoughts, that we look at the use of digital technologies in early childhood. And I think we haven't put the onus enough on teachers during this conversation. A lot of the work has to be done by teachers. I think they should put some thought and some action into what they should really decide what to show their children and what experiences they'd like to give them. And so if for the moment it is the teacher leading the way, that is already something whilst we wait to equip every child with a device, etc. And I think with that, we will get some way on. Thank you.
Fantastic stuff. We've been speaking to Amasewa Nekwitete. She's the Secretary General of the Ghana Commission for UNESCO, and she's coordinator of Ghana's presence and contribution to dialogue and action at UNESCO as a member state. She also advises the government of Ghana on UNESCO matters. An experienced teacher. Indeed, one of my producers says you were his English teacher at SOS, and you were probably one of his best teachers, and he's now one of my research guys, Susu Graham. So maybe later I'll call you about what type of student Susu was.
Do.
Yeah, and then of course, all right, Dr. Naomi Jepong, an educator. She's the director of operations at Alpha Beta Educational Centers, a medical doctor by training, but she's also now the designer and implementer of a full-time leadership track called the Dinkrahin Leadership Program. And she also runs that in parallel with the Cambridge International Education Curriculum. Alpha Beta Education Center in Dansoman is where she works. Naomi, thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you so much.
We also had a couple of inserts. We had Dr. Abishai Anlima, a clinical psychologist at the Brain and Mind Center. A lot of you are asking for that clip. It is in the video that we have put on. So basically, if you're watching this video, you just have to scroll back a few minutes. You'll get the video, and we'll try and make it available as well. He spoke about the impact of tech on young learners, and then we had a Vox Pop. Don't forget, EdTech Monday comes your way every last Monday of the month. Is brought to you by the Mastercard Foundation in partnership with MEST Africa, and it tackles the very exciting subject of technology and education. My name is Bernard Avlet. The program was live on MEST Africa's Facebook page and also on CTFM's Facebook page. Well, lots of you are commenting on the labor issues as well. Watch out for Prime News. There'll be a lot of focus on that throughout the day.